afternoon session is on solutions for the prevention of marine litter. Over the last couple of days, we've spoken about how to monitor marine litter. We've spoken about the impact of marine litter, but now it's time for us to take a closer look at how to prevent the generation of marine litter. We have 4 experts with us. They're going to be talking to us about practical experiences, projects, and the policies that have been introduced on the prevention of waste. So quite simply, we're talking about not generating the waste in the first place. We need to close the tap, this tap of waste is pouring into seas. And basically, prevention is the best of all remedies. So we're going to look at various different examples. We're going to begin with Pedro Fernández, he is the project manager at MedWaves. This is a regional center of UNEP /MAP, Regional Activity Center for the United Nations. He has 15 years of experience in governance, policy development, both focusing on marine litter and how to prevent marine litter. He has worked in the north of Africa and southern Mediterranean, the Balkan states as well, on the implementation of different regulations to ban plastic bags and similar in the food and beverage industries as well. And he's going to speak to us about his project, BeMed-Islands, which is a project to capitalize on the processes on small islands. This is funded. So let's hear from you. Thank you so much. 15 years, yeah, okay, I'm feeling that little bit older. So, as has already been said, I'm going to talk about a project. And it's more than a project now, it's an entire initiative to capitalize on the projects that were funded by Billion Plastic Net in the Mediterranean. Now, you probably are not yet aware of Billion Plastic Net. This includes UICN, Terra Foundation, and other organizations, mainly from France. It's based in Monaco. And what they did was they brought together different organizations that sought to combat marine litter. And amongst other things, they fund initiatives in the Mediterranean, mainly led by NGOs, and have a specific initiative for programs in the Mediterranean where they could fund actions related to marine litter. So citizen science, working in the private sector, working on action plan alongside local stakeholders, actions on the islands, and so on and so forth. So let's look at the BeMed-Islands community as a network of people in the Mediterranean working on island issues. This is what we call the BeMed-Islands community. Billion Plastic Med entrusted us with this because of the role that we played in the Mediterranean. We have also our representative from Smilo with us, who also works with small islands, so that we could have a capitalization process to be able to have the greatest possible impact on these islands through these projects. Again, I'm going to run through it very swiftly, but the publication you can see is the end product of our project. It's collection of interviews, and the participants tell us about their experiences and the obstacles that they've had when rolling out these projects. And also we have the Friul Declaration. This was an end product of the project that we organized in Marseille, which was we drew up the Friul rules, and therefore we brought together 26 different NGOs in the Mediterranean. It's a great number of NGOs that have committed to continue to work and disseminate the results of this project. So through the Declaration of Friul, we want to continue to work with the Plastic Med Net and projects along similar lines to be able to capitalize on the experiences and then to be able to extrapolate the results of these projects to other islands. We have specific cases. For example, here in the Balearic Islands, we have Anna from Net on projects to work with the drinks and catering industries to reduce the use of single-use plastics, and therefore we look at their experiences in the Balearic Islands and replicate them in other regions of the Mediterranean. So we have Save the Net. They focus their work on the Balearic Islands, but the idea is to take their experiences and then to apply their experiences in other places. Then, as to the themes in general terms, well, we've focused on various different areas. For example, reduce SUPs on cruise ships, you can see in the photo, or developing local alternatives to single-use plastics. And this is a project from the south of France, or in North African contexts, which are very different to what we will find in Europe. There, our projects are focused more on basic waste management. In Yerba, in Tunisia, they worked alongside the local town council to be able to create infrastructures to take paper, card, and glass and to sort those waste streams. Now, because of budgetary issues and staffing issues, it's been very difficult. So therefore, we have this work with this particular council. And then in the capitalization process, we have tried to open up dialogues with local town councils to make these long-term plans, because this should be the competence of the waste management department of the local town councils. So this is the work that we've been doing. There's one thing I would like to quickly talk about, working as an islands manager for MedWaves. We have the BeMed project, and we've worked a lot on the issue of single-use plastics. As you probably all know, because of the directive, certain member states have the obligation to do certain things. And it's been good for us to see at local level what the difficulties are when implementing the Single-Use Plastics Directive. There are items that are easy to dispose of, but there's still many problems with certain single-use plastics, and these are problems that the directive does not help us to overcome. So we are almost like a sentry police force, no? Trying to enforce implementation of directive and seeing why they can't do it, sometimes because of lack of capacities or lack of knowledge or lack of alternatives. So we're looking at the alternative projects that are being developed. So I think that this certainly is testimony to the strength of our capitalization process. Another thing, Ignasi, that I'd like to talk about, we did. Am I okay for time? Let me just run off to pick up my mobile phone so that I can keep time. But I will be brief, I promise. This morning, we're talking about EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Now, we are an international organization working a lot in the north of Africa. In certain countries, we focus on this a lot, on EPR. So how can I best put this? At governmental level, often there is no real extended producer responsibility in place. But then if we look at the private sector, they're beginning to mobilize to improve, for example, the management and recycling of packaging. Now, they're not going to take on 100% responsibility, EPR, but they're going to try to create infrastructures. They're going to raise awareness to be able to sort this waste in a way that functions properly. Now, in the EU, we have the collective extended producer responsibility systems, and we also have PPP, the polluter pays principle. But there are certain weaknesses at governmental level in North Africa, and when we see these institutional weaknesses, the private sector needs to step in. And then when it becomes more obligatory, then we can begin to move on from there. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Gracias, Pedro.
Thank you, Pedro. Certainly, yes, the situation in North Africa is very different, but in other places of the world too. So we have to adapt the solutions accordingly, depending on the local context. And we can't always say that there's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, no? And it's going to work both for Ireland and for Morocco and for Egypt, no? Case-by-case approach. Now I'm going to hear from Cecilia Ruano. She is a researcher at the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. She is a graduate of tourism and has various different master's degrees in the sustainable resource use. And she is here now to talk to us about Interreg project. Capon Liter is the name of that particular project, capitalizing on good practices on coasts so that we can find ways of preventing marine litter. So, Candy, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by giving thanks to the organizers. I'm going to speak on behalf of my organization in this panel discussion, so thank you to you. It is great interest to us. Pedro and Sylvain worked with us on a closely related project on the capitalization of good practices, on an international scale. Capon Litter is funded by the Interreg Europe funding stream. So I'd like to look at certain key aspects. Yesterday, I gave a presentation with a lot more text, a lot more content, but Catherine, in her presentation this morning, spoke about how photos tell stories. No? So these photos are a story of participatory learning. 2 years on the island of Fuerteventura, which is where we have developed this particular project here in Spain. And you can see from the images that there is a significant process it's a multi-stakeholder process, as Ignasi has spoken about already, because it needs to be participatory. It is not a hierarchy, and there are no asymmetries in participation, but basically we had many people with different profiles from across the various different sectors involved. So these are the photos, and there are two messages in terms of text. A lot of participatory learning. Now, in the Cap on Litter program, we underscored many valuable aspects. So what is the partnership aspect in Cap on Litter? Well, there's 7 different country partners in Portugal. Then we have partners in Croatia, Bulgaria, Greece, France, and we are the lead partners here in Spain. And then we have Zero Waste Europe is another partner. They have supported us in the preparation and development of the products that were used in the learning process. And so we had this learning process. And the main goal was to identify good practices in the regions of the partner countries so that we could improve transfer. In this case, we had an international learning project. We had inter-regional learning events, 7 of them, and then at the same time in parallel we had a participatory process organized with the different stakeholders within the partner countries. In this case, we had the island of Fuerteventura, in the case of Spain, and then we defined the profiles of different agents and stakeholders from other islands or from other island systems. We have the team also from Save the Med as well. They were part of the participatory process, as Pedro has already mentioned, and they helped us to be able to incorporate all of the stakeholders of interest on coastal issues so that we could better focus on the prevention of plastics, particularly single-use plastics, particularly in the tourism and hotel industries. So you can see some photos here of the good practices. And One of the main outcomes of Cap on Litter was the preparation of 7 action plans for each of the 7 partner countries. In this case, the Fuerteventura, we had 4 different actions. These corresponded to the 3 areas. First, zero waste, coastal communities, and beaches. Now, these are the 3 main strands. But basically, the main focus is, beyond the mitigation of marine litter, is the elimination or elimination of single-use plastics on our coast. So we had the support of Interreg Europe, and basically many of the action plans were very similar. But the overriding goal was to have a policy that could then be presented locally, or that had already been approved. And this policy would then be used as the goal by which the initiatives and actions can be prepared. Now, often policymakers come up with policies, but then it is more important that specific actions are then prepared so that we can reach those goals. In this case, the policy chosen was the strategic plan for Fuerteventura for the period 2022 to 2026. Now, 4 key actions. These are currently being implemented between now and June, the end of June this year. We began implementation July last year. So these are some of the photos of the good practices, and the study visits that complemented the international learning events. Then, of course, COVID hit, and everybody's aware of the impact of COVID, the pandemic, on mobility. But we continue to work. And you can see the photos. These are some of the good practices. And Portugal, awareness-raising campaigns. Now, Fuerteventura has done a lot of work in the past on this, incorporating various different elements. Yes, you see Cap on Litter there. And then other good practices related with returnable plastic goods. Now you can see waste management facilities there in the photos. Now, so this is all of the work that we did. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the Q&A session afterwards. Thank you. Thank you so much, Candy. Before we continue, Pedro and Candy, this word, capitalization. Capitalization. What do you mean by this? How would you define it? Okay, capitalizing on good practices in coastal regions to prevent marine litter. But when you say capitalization, what does this mean? Some people might understand the concept of transfer, sharing, taking it to the level of policy making. What do you mean when you say capitalization? Well, for us, the process of capitalization means to identify good practices that have been introduced in other countries and then bring to bear a transfer process so that we can then extrapolate these practices and use them in our own countries and regions. Okay, creating a community of projects. So there's a lot of exchange between the various different partners on these projects, creating synergy. And then, obviously, we can see what works, and we can then transfer it to other places. And then there's the political aspect. For example, a policy paper was published in the COP by Barcelona. And then we looked at the outcomes of that policy paper. We had a specific meeting on marine litter, and other countries were very receptive to this. And then we wanted to translate to Arabic so that we could then make this policy paper available for the countries of North Africa. You have the Green Book as well. This is one of the outcomes. This is going to be presented at an event in Brussels. Perfect. Our next guest is Raquel Malo. She is the representative of CINCA, which is the Canary Islands Industrial and Environmental Association. She has worked a great deal in issues related to forests and related aspects. So she can talk to us about the industrial aspects when we want to begin to talk about preventing marine litter. Raquel. So as Ignasi has said, yes, I represent the Industrial Association here in the Canary Islands. Now, many people might be aware of the fact that industry does exist in the Canary Islands. The title of my presentation is that to prevent is to protect. So in industry, I have a whole set of good practices. And certainly we need to have these good practices because legislation requires this of us. And prevention is basically the area that we need to focus on because we need to prevent litter from reaching the sea in the first place. So this is the industrial framework in which we are working now. We need to look at the design of products, and we also need to look at the consumption, the end consumers. We've therefore had to prepare a whole raft of good practices for us to be able to streamline the whole process. The DJ for the environment at the European Union say that more than 50% of the waste that reaches the sea is plastic. So we have all of the directives, legislation, strategies for the elimination of plastic or for the treatment and processing of plastic, all of the EU-wide national and regional laws. Quite simply, despite all of this, we are not tackling this in a way that is going to work. The high percentages in weight continues to be a problem. And as we've heard earlier, some people do it well, some people don't do it well. Some industrial stakeholders do a good job, others don't do such a great job. So therefore, what we need to do is focus on prevention of waste. If waste can become a raw material that we can then use afterwards, then that is when we'll be actually doing something that works. Now, if we look at the recycling industry, for example, we look at waste as a value. Now, we see it as raw materials that can then be reintroduced into the cycle. Now, we do believe that all of these materials have to be recovered and reused. We need to have a virtuous circle of reuse. This is why we need to prevent this waste from reaching the sea. And to prevent, we're going to have to be able to manage waste properly. And industry is doing a lot of work. At ASINCA, the Canary Islands Industry Association, we have many different measures, environmental measures that are moving in the right direction. In fact, we in the Canary Islands live in an outermost region of Europe. We live from the sea, we live from the land as well. And we know that land is a limited resource, and the less land we use for waste management, the greater the value of the land that we live on. And quite basically, the Canary Islands needs tourism. We need to be able to have a clean environment to attract people to the islands, and we depend on our environment. So at ASINCA, we work in various different areas. We are on the maritime cluster of the Canary Islands. At this cluster, we focus on the entire water life cycle, and we have also been participants in the Canary Islands Blue Economy Strategy, because we are firmly of the conviction that we need to understand the life cycle of any product in our economy. And industry is always going to have its part to play. There's always going to be an environmental good practice that is going to help us to improve the work we do. Then we have this good practices manual. So what do we do through this good practice? Well, we look at waste, we look at recycling waste, reusing it so that we can once again have raw materials that can be reused in the production of new products. We also focus on energy efficiency, the reuse of water, of wastewater, for our industrial processes. We can use it for agricultural purposes as well. No, so the reuse of wastewater as well is very important. And we also work on prevention through eco-design. No? The design of products so that when they are put on the market, then they are in the right shape. No, we need to have a transformation of industry, but we need to minimize the impact that we have. So how are we going to do this? We need to innovate in processes. We need to study the placing of products on the market, and through these studies we're going to be able to understand better. We work with scraps, the collective EPRs, we work with ECOAQUA, and by doing this we can reuse products, we can reuse waste, and that waste will not reach our seas. Thank you.
David González.
And now our last speaker, David González Montañez, who is the director of Ewaste, which is a reverse logistics company here in the Canary Islands, and is president of the Association of Waste Managers. He has a degree in business administration, and he's going to show us the point of view of waste managers. And now the floor is yours.
5 minutos.
You have 5 minutes.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Antes que nada, pues, bueno, gracias Ignacio por tu presentación. Antes que nada, pues.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I would like to thank the government of the Canary Islands and IBAM for their kind invitation to our organizations to this Marlies forum. So I agree with Raquel. Ahercan, which is our organization, is an organization of this wrongly called waste, because we believe they are raw materials and resources. And, well, first of all, since we only have 5 minutes, I think it's necessary to talk about the goals and the objective of Ahercan, and maybe then when you are given the option to ask questions, maybe you can ask any other questions you can have. So Ahercan gathers different companies working in this sector, and we need to change this paradigm that going against that places waste against raw materials, because otherwise we will never reduce this conception. So what we're doing through the promotion of projects and other types of technology is to reduce this difference between resource and waste. What's the difference between resources and waste? For me, waste is the failure of the system, and Íñigo and I work together for many hours a day, so that's maybe sometimes we could say that we think alike. So maybe sometimes when we are not allowed or we can't have a second use for a material, then we are talking about waste, and if we can't give a second life to this, it becomes a waste, and sometimes it becomes marine litter. So how are we working? There are two main essential gaps, essential paradigms. One of them is the technological gap, that is basically based on the idea that we don't have the necessary technology to give a second life to that product. And the economic gap, which is the second one, is that although there is a possibility, it is extremely costly for the business people or for the waste manager to implement it. So sometimes it is simply impossible. So we do have solutions. We need to invest in RD&I. And also we need this economic support so the investor can collaborate or can make it feasible, the whole process. So through this, we need to reduce the gaps we are mentioning. And sometimes we need to establish relations with the public administrations and the so-called scraps, or even the individual system. So in our ideas, scraps are essential because they fund the whole process, and also there should be many more, in our opinion, because there are potential resources and some of them are not being used. And if without funding, we will never guarantee that they become resources. That's what we all want. then we have to also comply with the sector regulations and to promote the circular economy in the Canary Islands. This is also essential, and I will stop here because we are the last link of a chain that should be working perfectly. We should go from prevention, as Raquel mentioned, and go through every single link until we reach the waste manager. So if we think about an insular territory, if we do get this, we would make sure that these wastes will not reach the sea, but also we will develop the 3 pillars of the sustainable development, which is the economic, because we will be creating richness in these outermost regions, and the environmental, because we would avoid that those elements would end up in the sea or another treatment plants in the mainland Spain, which would have a negative impact because of its carbon footprint in the transportation, and they would also create green jobs. So we promote this circular economy because otherwise we would reach the Canarian paradox, which is analog to any other paradox in any other outermost region. So sometimes we install treatment plants in our area, but for that we need the whole critical mass. So now I'm going to get my e-waste cap, and that was something that Ignasi mentioned before. How is it possible that the plant in the Canary Islands, just one plant, doesn't get the whole critical mass to make it feasible? Well, this has not happened. I'm very happy of being Canarian, and it's wonderful living here, but we need to bear one thing in mind. Our market is not perfect, as it is the case in any other outermost regions. And it's not imperfect because we are far away from the continent. And sometimes, as we are importers, we need to import everything. Containers come here full of products, but then we don't send material back. And this is good for shipping companies. And this is done in the right way, but this is also damaging the situation in the Canary Islands, and to develop this idea of circular economy that is required in any outermost region to guarantee that this litter ends up in the sea. So it is essential that we all use the regulations in place to defend this resource if we create treatment plants in the Canary Islands or in any other archipelago that is one of these outermost regions. This is something that a message I wanted to convey in my presentation. You have 1 more minute left. Okay. So I will finish very quickly. In order to get to reach these objectives, we need to focus on some points. One of them is that in order to reach these goals, we need to strengthen our relations with the different entities, public entities, so the directives become more solid. And also, it is essential to create regulations that is convinced that circular economy is necessary, and also includes the private initiative from a regional point of view, and especially to create new regulations. This is all. Now I will be open to answer any questions you may have in the Q&A time. Thank you. Thank you, David. I really liked what you said about this difference between waste and resources. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Ignasi, and of a waste management association in Catalonia, and it's true, we need to change our names from waste to resources. Yeah. Now, I think we are heading to the Q&A moment, and if you don't have any questions, I will ask questions to the speakers. Is there any question I would like to ask about this topic? Sylvain? No, there is some more. Yes? As we were talking about prevention and talking about different sectors, including the tourist sector, which is one of the main sectors in the Canary Islands, and also the industrial sector, I wanted to put on the table a topic that hasn't been mentioned yet. What can we say about those containers that can be returned? Is that a big battle here in the Canary Islands because legislation hasn't been passed in this sense? And we believe that the best way to guarantee that the waste doesn't even reach the container is that even at the supermarket, this can be collected, and then it can be some money can be refunded. So maybe in Croatia we could see that there wasn't a single plastic bottle across the city of Pula because it was that had a cost, of course, and people just collected to get money from that. So why are we still stuck at this point? Well, when it comes to evolution in the use of waste and containers, and when it comes to returnable bottles, for instance, we need to concentrate on the processes, of course. There are some laws from 2022 that already set the basic lines to install this return system in Spain, because we have been told that if we don't reach a certain level of recycling percentages and collection numbers, maybe we can put in place these systems. When it comes to marine litter, I think this is essential. I think it's the other way around. So if we let people choose to return the containers, and those packages or containers that are not returned are then introduced into a different system, because by creating these dynamics that we have to reach 70%, or any other percentage, whatever the limit is, we need to create a monitoring system and to believe the statistics, to make it possible. So sometimes you know that these statistics are not very much welcome by the general public. Yes, yeah, analyzing data and collecting data processes are essential too. But I think it is good news that this idea of returning containers is included within the regulations in place. Maybe at some point both systems will coexist in society. Of course, in the past we started with the yellow container to collect plastic, and then by following the implementation, following cost issues, the whole system to return containers hasn't been so popular. Yeah, would you like to add anything? Yeah, we are trying to implement it again, and the new law will foster, in a way, this implementation. Yes, in the past we introduced this yellow container that was cheaper, of course, but I agree with this gentleman. I think the future should go through returning containers. And again, this is included in the new act, but we need to create the context to make it effective. Well, yes, again, this has been included in the new act, and in certain sectors, such as the one of the Horeca, are working on this returning system as it was done in the past. People returned Coke or beer bottles. It is a very simple system indeed, and supermarkets and citizens can implement it easily, although regulations must be created and tested. But I think it is a system that is familiar to all of us, and is being applied in a very efficient way in different sectors. I think maybe the work should be on raising awareness among citizens, because we can see the containers, but citizens are not aware. Citizens need to understand that companies can't simply do everything, and us as users need to be aware of the fact that if I buy a bottle of water, I need to put it, once I use it, I need to put it in the right container. They are not that far away. They're just around the corner. So I do agree with, I do support any action that helps us to remove any kind of waste. And the best waste is that is never created. And if it is created, then it should be collected properly. So thank you very much. Pedro, would you like to add anything? I fully agree with everything that has been said. And yes, and we will see that it has been recently applied in Spain. I think in France they are planning to do that, but it is only planned for drinks. But this is something that should be done also for the for food containers. And we are using compostable packages but I don't see the benefit. So or maybe we should also think about these returnable containers for coffee, for instance. I think it's something that we should keep in mind. I would like to add, in line with what has been said by Pedro, and I see that Anna is nodding, that we need to see the good practices that have been applied, and this wonderful index they have, what they call honest alternatives. We have loads of biofakes regarding alternatives that are being sold as part of the solution, but they are not. Yes, here we need to focus on the single-use plastic because we need to prioritize reuse and returnable containers, so they can be refilled again, and to think about or to think why we are putting some single-use plastics in the market. But I also like to put on the table some aspects about the social role of citizens. I mean, we are all citizens, so why are we differentiating values? Do we have different values from our working environment, from the roles we play at home? This is something, these are discussions and debates I have with my family members at the dinner table, because we need to get an alignment of values between what is said at work and what is said at home, of course. Sylvain, do you have a question?
Lamentablemente.
Unfortunately, I have to ask a question in English. One question for David.
I want to try. I don't try.
Vale. Lo entiendo un poco, pero bueno.
Okay.
Do you have an example of this cooperation between islands? I'm just curious in terms of waste management. Can you take one, like in the archipelago of Canaria, just for me to know? Is there any waste that is like taken in one island, brought to the other? Is Tenerife a center? I don't know if that's a clear question, but is there any example of cooperation between islands? This is for you. And then I have one maybe for Pedro or Candy, I don't know, but you were reflecting on the role of the civil society, and I think that's also very interesting for our perspective in Smilo, since we're an association, and we believe that just as islands are a fertile ground for innovation or to be sort of whistleblowers, like Pedro was kind of saying in his presentation as well, checking if the directive really can happen on the ground. Maybe can you reflect on this role, and what do you see from your perspective, an international organization, you are an academy organization, how do you see the role of civil society in tackling marine litter? So,
Bueno, creo que entendí que...
I think I understood that if you could give an example in the Canary Islands of how waste is managed in a circular way. The greatest example is Probably I will speak in Spanish.
Por ejemplo, tienes la planta de tratamiento que
We have some treatment plans in which we work, that is Ewaste Canarias, and where we work with electronic devices. So obviously we have agreements with different entities, and we have also agreements with the ones that are originating the different resources, as we call them. So we have the big shopping centers, big distribution centers, the public entities, and what we call the managers, who are the ones that used to deal with electronic devices. So I reach trade agreements with them to gather and collect these resources and then bring them to my plant and treat them through European standards and to transform them into aluminium or iron or any other material. So then they are reintroduced in the market. So that's what we do here in the Canary Islands. But from Ahercan, what I'm saying is that we can do this with other industries in parallel, and that would create a very positive environmental impact and richness for the country, for the Canary Islands. Yeah, maybe Pedro would like to answer. Yes, there you go. So the idea that has been exposed by Sylvain is very interesting. Thank you, Sylvain. In my opinion, it is essential that as citizens, we need to believe in our power for change. We can change, and we have a great deal of power to change consumption models. As Raquel mentioned before, we need to think who needs to be pointed at as responsible for the problems we have. So we have to think about that this is a shared process and we are all part of the solution too. And this is important that we all bear this in mind. We also need to focus on the eco-social approach that this whole process has. And this highlights or establishes breakdown in between what is social and what is ecological, because at the end of the day, both need to be working hand in hand at all times. So I like to seize this moment to highlight also the ecofeminist perspective in all this, because there are alternative insights, and we need to change this paradigm to how we take care of life as well, because and this is important to be understood as citizens. This is essential. And we also do this from our project, and we have seen good practices that have been achieved in Fuerteventura that can be used. Of course, we have to take a look at them to understand how these science and citizenship alternatives are being developed in Fuerteventura and how this is integrated in society. This is important that we all take a look there. Yeah, can I? Sure. I would like to say two things now. As socials, as an NGO, as an association or NGOs, there are 2 points that need to be tackled. We are working really strongly with public institutions and the private sector, and we see this in some sectors with entities as if we were consultants, because we are informing them on how much money they will save if they reduce single-use plastic use. We saw that in Croatia, where we suggested the increase of the purchase of, for instance, single-use plastic. But there's another part, I'm going to be rather critical maybe, that I have the feeling sometimes that, especially in the NGOs, it's becoming rather it's rather understanding, or it's very open to in terms of beach cleaning. So, but sometimes we have the feeling that it's the NGO's responsibility to solve the problem of cleaning beaches, because this is rather annoying, because it is the institutions the institution's responsibility. The NGO's role is very important, but responsibility cannot be transferred to someone else. I fully agree with you. We need to change the focus. We need to change. It's not only about taking citizens to beaches to clean the beach from plastics as a ludic activity, but we need to think who is producing those plastics, those containers that are eventually becoming this waste on the beach, and what measures are being implemented to avoid these waste reaching the coast. I do agree with you, of course. Yeah, I don't know if the audience agree with us or not. Any other question? Yeah, there's another question here. Catherine? Maybe I could go against this with some nuances that I would like to highlight. I don't think it's enough. I think the level of awareness is not enough, because maybe sometimes we believe that because it comes in the media, people are aware of the situation. I disagree. I think we need to work harder in this, and there's just a great deal of marketing, underlying marketing, and I think maybe it's greenwashing basically. But maybe this is not the case here. Social washing, maybe it's just pretending in a way what they are doing. But there is no doubt that it is necessary, that we need to work on this. But maybe this maybe it adds up, but it shouldn't substitute the role of administrations. So when we started working on this, we told the administrations, we're not going to clean the beach, we're going to regenerate the coast, which is something different. You must clean the coast. It goes beyond just cleaning. Catherine?
Espera, que estaba Catherine, que quería...
Thank you. It's a comment. Our EPR scheme for the e-waste, or the electrical waste in Ireland. So when they sat down and they saw the figures were kind of poor, I suppose the competent authority demanded a 1-for-1. So for instance, if you're going to put something on the market, you must take something off the market, and that has the targets for collection. It's 60% of the results are from this one on, put one on, put one off. So in terms of, especially within Ireland, and we're the same because we have a lot of electrical goods and they're not made in Ireland. We import a lot of electrical goods. So to have that collection rate is really good, but it's driven by the demand and a legal requirement for a one-on-one. Now it can be, you can have one wash machine and one toaster, and they work on the weight. But it was really helpful, and we're hoping to apply that model to the fishing gear, to increase, because we feel that, the fishing ports are in very, very rural areas, very poor access. So if a fishing gear supplier is going to go 300 miles, please bring something back in your van or on your lorry. So it's a little bit different, but it's been successful in Ireland for the electrical goods, for that one-on-one, 1-for-1. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. La ley española.
The Spanish Act, the Royal Decree from RAES, also foresees that citizens can return their electrical appliances in the place where they're going to buy a new one. For instance, a toaster or a fridge. So he's asking if there's a possibility. Yes, according to the new royal decree, and there are several royal decrees in this sense. So the distribution centers have an important role to play, because when you buy an electronic appliance for your house, you are implicitly paying for the proper treatment at the end of their lifespan. So you have the right, so once you buy a new appliance, that you can leave the old one because you have already paid for that service, and to make it sure that it becomes a new resource, as I said before. And then she mentioned something that this system could work for fishing gears. Yeah, indeed, what is happening now with e-waste is parallel to what is to develop another circular economy model with other resources. Because at the end of the day, the citizens are creating what used to be called trash, but now we need to think about resources that could have a second life by reconverting them or by reusing them or by recovering it. So this is also foreseen in current legislation. I do agree with Catherine, of course, and this is something that we are promoting from AHERCAN, and also the preparation for the reuse of those elements. So this is becoming more and more important. In the past, that was described in the Act, and the percentages for obligation were lower, but now we're seeing more and more that this is improving bit by bit. Hello. This morning, I was cleaning the beach with the kids that were here this morning. Every time we join and we work with volunteers, people just simply get very surprised. It doesn't matter who organizes that. The important thing is that people see that how they can help. And maybe we have worked too much on some certain types of waste, but we need to think about, for instance, filter tips. And with the works that we are doing at the moment in terms of waste prevention, this is something that is not included, for instance. And of course, volunteers will not solve the problem. This is true. We can't, as politicians, we can't think that beaches need to be cleaned by volunteers, namely beach, river, or any other natural area. Volunteers, they think that, well, volunteers have free time, they just send them to clean the beach. No, we can't think like this. We need to invest, and these cleaning processes need to be paid by someone. And I don't know if this new royal decree on containers, if we finally manage to express that EcoEmbes or any other companies of the like participate officially in these collection activities. So this is something we have been thinking for the last years. And what about bigger items found on the beach? Do they need to be collected by volunteers too? No. We need help. It's just to give some hints. We do need volunteers, of course, but because they help us to raise awareness. Of course, we are not thinking about abolishing cleanups or finishing this. What we're saying is, like, let's think all together, with the kids, for instance, but kids and adults too, of course. Who is responsible for this bottle? We need to think about that. And the royal decree, which is this general trash that is described in this royal decree, needs who is going to pay for. I mean, the royal decree establishes who is going to pay for this collection, but now we need to think how these amounts are going to be calculated, how much of this amount is filling filter tips or bottles, and who is going to do that? Well, maybe some volunteers from maybe from the city councils, and then they should be paid by the manufacturer. But maybe we should think about a more professional way of doing this. Maybe we could have, like, people cleaning the streets at the cities. Maybe we could have people cleaning the streets. And yeah, now we have the new decree, royal decree for tobacco products that also foresees the responsibilities for manufacturers to over these filter tips that appear on beaches. Well, there's a lot of work to be done here, of course, yes. 5 more minutes? Okay, do we have a 5-minute break? And then we will come back with the next session. Thank you very much, and thanks to all our speakers.